I will put my picture on in a moment. Just finishing up a little behind the camera type stuff. And then I'll put the camera on, and I'm just, waiting for a few people to join. Hello, UC Fit. Almost getting ready to turn on the camera. Okay. Think we can turn the camera on now. So UC Fit, you're a new name, I guess. I was wondering how you found me. I don't know if you feel like typing that in there. If you don't, that's quite all right. Oh, let me turn my camera on. There we go. Take a few seconds for that to happen. There we go. You know, Darcy, shit connections seem to be going around. I went to have a meeting earlier with somebody, and I had to restart my computer. Everything that I did, tried Google Hangouts, that didn't work. So I said, okay, trusty Zoom. Zoom crashed. Zoom never crashes. So I restarted my computer, and things started going. It was really interesting. So I had that Saturday night special live stream that ran like 5 hours and 4 minutes, and I post the shows up on the One Truth forum, and I also put them on Minds. But in Minds, it's just like, oh, nice to know you. See, thank you. I put them on Minds, but and I like Minds. I enjoy the news feed. I enjoy I enjoy the adultship of the administration. I can't say that everybody who belongs to an alternate social media thing like Minds is really all that much different. At least in the I guess there's, you have the people who produce content, and I'm one of them, and then you have the people who comment on the people who produce comment. And the people who provide the comments are certainly a mixed bag everywhere, from sublime and informed and thoughtful to you have to wonder whether or not the river ran a little high and the trolls got flushed out from underneath their bridges. And so now they have to get on a keyboard and work out their discomfort from being dislodged from being underneath the bridge. Hello, Jessica. So anyway, but after even on my on the forum, I said I did a 5-hour live stream. I'm not sure about posting it, because 5 hours. It's like, it was fun to do it, but leaving it after the fact, it's almost like a video of a party. You could have a great party and then you play the video, and unless you were there, it might not be all that much. Hello, Lee. But I had a really good time on the live stream. And Saturday nights very often, I guess maybe, having 6 decades on the planet, there's a certain amount of, habituation to something happening on a Saturday night. Now, for years, Saturday night was always, I was playing somewhere. I think Saturday Night Live had started and was a complete, success. The early Saturday Night Live crew was amazing. And it was 3 years before I was actually home on a Saturday night so I could watch Saturday Night Live. That's how booked I was in those days. So Saturday night comes with a certain habituation of just like, hey, what are we doing tonight? So I fired up the live stream Saturday night, and we went for 5 hours. It was a lot of fun. Thank you for all that were there. So and I was in conversations and dialogues, and doing the meaningful work of keeping a community balanced, psychologically healthy, and the work that goes with being coherent. You can have a nice coherent, vortex, which is part of being a part of coherence. And all it takes is for a few things to get thrown into that vortex for things to suddenly start to wobble. So correcting wobbles, thank you, Doc. Correcting wobbles when they're first starting to wobble is a lot easier than when the coherence actually starts breaking down. And not only do you have you no longer have a wobbly vortex, you have a vortex that's basically falling apart. Hello, Jet Pet. Get that one out, relight it later. So tonight, I picked a title called Keeping It Subtle. And what I was, that's applicable on a lot of different comprehensions. And a big, because of who and what we really are. Again, when we think about the 3D world, we're talking about what we'll call the natural world, the phenomenal world, the world of rocks that bruise. But frequency-wise, when we kind of leave where things are no longer 3D or solid, there's a continuation. And our consciousness is capable of negotiating that continuation, and basically having a foot in both worlds. And we are a kind of like a dual world being. So one world is quite grossly physical, and the other one is very subtle. And there is a subtle anatomy, which one of the major components of our subtle anatomy is the chakra system. Now, some people have said, oh, they're foreign installations. You know something? Well, it doesn't matter who installed them. They're portals. And once you have a portal, you are the guard of the portal. So really, to me, what the chakra education that is part of the Vedas is about how you own your own portals. And once you are the guard, so to speak, of your portal, then it's yours to use. It's yours. And there's, the chakra system actually breaks down, let's call it, like the full spectrum of frequencies, white light, whatever you want to call it. The rainbow being one of the ways you can kind of see a breakdown of white light into at least 7 discrete visible frequencies. Roy G. Biv, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. It's funny, I learned the colors of the chakras, and I learned that acronym Roy G. Biv in science class. I forget what, I mean, I took so many science classes in high school, I almost can't parse them out. And, but it was, I remember how we had to know the colors of, of the visible spectrum. And Roy G. Biv was the acronym they gave us. And then, all you have to remember, oh yeah, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. And that makes it really kind of easy. And each one of those frequency streams that in the visible spectrum we see as these colors has a chakra within our body, and then there are also things outside, but it's in the body that really matters, because our personality structure, the ego structure, which I like to call the personality structure, is a composite of those various seats of consciousness. The chakras are seats of consciousness. Now I have a very it's something that was written like in 1986 or whatever. It's vibrational. What is it? I'll leave it. This is an out of print book. I can't see it in the camera because I'm on a delay, but I'll look at my. There we go. All right, I got it right. There we go. So it's Gem Elixirs and Vibrational Healing, Volume 1 by Garudas. Garudas died or suddenly was put off the planet when he decided to diverge from the planet. He wrote Volume 1 and Volume 2 of Gem Elixirs and their spiritual properties. He did flower essences and vibrational healing, and then he also did the spiritual properties of herbs. After he had those four kind of landmark books of his, he then wrote a book about the New World Order. And this was in like 91. This was very early 90s. After he wrote that book, he died. And I've never gotten that book, but it was like probably one of the first books really busting the New World Order. So, hello, Niche. But anyway, there's some brilliant work, but it's really, really dense, and I don't want to I might read a few pieces raw. What I really want to do, and also, as I mentioned, I think, hello, Mari, as I mentioned in the Saturday night stream, I do want to start some things. It'll be part of, a 2018 program. It will be tied in a little Patreon, have no effect on everything that people are used to me doing. It will only affect things I haven't done and want to do, and will kind of create a little bit of some structure around that. And I want to kind of do a little bit of what I'm calling, what is it? Something 101. Oh, it's kind of like the Mysteries 101. And it would be very much about subtle anatomy. And the reason to do this really is not only to increase a word recognition about that gets used. And if we're going to go into the good stuff and really look to transmute ourselves, we're going to have to go into somewhat into the mystery teachings. The new age stuff is not going to work to get where we need to get as a coherence. There is no coherence in the New Age movement. The New Age movement is find who you like, go there, go to each other's live streams and argue over the small stuff. And for me, the most important thing, is Brandon here? Oh, hello, Brandon. Thank you. Understanding how the chakras work is one of the ways people are going to be able to break out of the emotion, the combination, because it takes the second and the third chakra. It kind of takes that limit, the lack of wisdom of logic. Third chakra is logical. It's our mental processes, and it's great at logic, but wisdom is not its province. Wisdom is of the heart. And when I'm looking across the spectrum of interaction amongst, let's call it, the people who are interested in knowledge, knowing the truth about who we really are, what are our origins, that group, the truth group, And when I look at the squabbles that are going on, to me, so much of that is that people do not know how to sit in a form of meditation. For me, one of the things of learning these various subtle things that we have to do inner work with is it allows us what I have called for over 20 years Western meditation. And for Western meditation is active. It's really basically about taking very much your active mind and giving it turning it towards the inner world. And but but then you need to know what you're looking at in the inner world, and learning about the basic functions of the chakras, especially the first three, because it's the first three that creates the Tower of Babel that we experience, and the focus on like where emotional hurts become the size of mountains, and that has to do with lack of energetic hygiene and getting stuck in places. And so there, what I would call Western active meditation is basically a lot of the whole thing of trying to get quiet. And everybody go, oh, I just can't do it. So so it seems like, oh well, we're not, we can't be productive here. But you can lay down and instead of trying to go blank, you create a sacred assignment. And then in that assignment, the normally active mind now has a commission of focus. So your objective isn't to clear your mind, but to keep a steady focus on what it is that you want to accomplish. And sometimes the best way to get started is knowing the colors and then meditating colors in each chakra. But that's kind of like the not even 101. I mean, obviously 101 of 101 is the colors, but the states of consciousness that reside in each chakra. And okay, some people are reading. All right. And by knowing the consciousness, now you can kind of understand where data signals arise. Like in other words, the first chakra will put out data signals that will get interpreted as feelings. They will arise because they have to come through the emotional complex anyway. When you think of the first chakra is really about survival. That everything's okay. I could be wrong, but when I think about how many men, when they get to a certain age, start to have prostate problems, and if you know where the first chakra is at the bottom of the spine, and if you know where the prostate is, it's kind of like, yeah, up your butt and a little forward. You understand that the prostate sits right in that first chakra of energy. And in this world, and now of course in the current setting, women will as they get older and they go like, oh, how am I, what if I live to 80? Do I have enough money to get through this? Will I keep my job? Will I get my retirement? All those kind of worries about just being in the world, just having a place to put your 2 feet and a roof over your head. That's first chakra stuff. And so, but you'll get information. In other words, that chakra is just basically looking around. Is like, do we need to do something? Its whole consciousness has to do with base camp. I mean, just like, okay, the ground is good. This looks safe. It's almost like an assessment of the landscape. If it rains, will I get washed out? And any concerns of that base camp will put the first chakra will then be imbalanced. Those concerns from the first chakra will then rise to the second chakra, because again, the energy is meant to rise. The second chakra is where we tend to process our emotions. That's where we feel happy, sad, rejected, insulted, offended, on and on and on. And I really sometimes reading the chat is just deadly for me. I'll just take a break and have a cigarette. God. I got to turn off a notification here. I don't want these sounds coming through. Come on, man. There we go. All right. Let me get back to the chat. I was reading something here. Base chakra grounded in the physical, Doc said. Yeah, I mean, if we were going to like use an imagery of energy. Now the base chakra is red. And this is why I'm going to start using some terms, tying some things together. In other words, if you say the base chakra is red, okay, that's actually quite a bit of information. Hello, Sandy. So right away, to me, this is why you would want some kind of esoterica 101. That's the term. So if you know the base chakra is red, and you also know your other things like, what else might be associated with red? Well, Mars is associated with red. Aries is associated with red. So, and then, so if you know that, and you might know that Aries in the zodiac, it would be like the first sign. And each of the 12 zodiacal signs has a quote-unquote motto, M-O-T-T-O. And the motto for Aries is I am. I'm an Aquarian. Our motto is I know. Virgo's is I analyzed. Scorpio, I believe, is I desire. Okay. This is Esoterica 101. I mean, these are these little pieces of information that actually sometimes, as you're sitting there and you consider it, and as you put these little pieces of information one by one, sometimes one of those pieces suddenly opens a door. And all kinds of stuff will come through. And that's why you want every little symbolic piece and know how they connect, because very often in those connections is where one of the keys are to open the door. So if we have the first chakra, imagine not being manifested. Imagine we're not in physicality yet. So the first chakra kind of is almost like, just like it's the first chakra, the first zodiacal sign. And you can either see us coming down into matter or arising from it. It doesn't matter, because especially when you look at Aries, the sign for Aries is actually like a V, and then it kind of, the horns go there. So there's a pointing down. You could also inverse it and point it up. The whole thing is that from the first, imagine that the first chakra is the emerging of consciousness into reality. So in a certain way, there's a reality to the first chakra that is very much like the concerns of an amoeba or a one-celled organism. The concerns of a one-celled organism to survive, to be able to duplicate itself, and to feed, obviously feed, those very simple sets of concerns that any one-celled organism has is very much a template you can take into the reality of your first chakra. If you can understand what the concerns of an amoeba would be, or a very, very simple organism, which is basically food, being in the right environment, temperatures, all the things that require it to survive in its environment. If you can get into that consciousness, you'll have a great door of understanding to how simple but profound the concerns of the first chakra are. They're as profound as any single-celled organism trying to stay around, at least for the first cell division. So that is kind of like the best way in an analogy for me to lay out what the concerns of the first chakra are. They're survival. And that's why it ties me back into, so when men who happen to have an important gland, the prostate gland, in that environment, when they start to get closer towards the middle age, you start to get concerned about your survival. So that puts like a little bit of that in that energy. So there's your prostate gland sitting in that energy, and it goes it kind of goes into a little clench, and the next thing you know, what happens? People can't pee anymore. They're dribbling because their prostate, because their the ureter, which is the tube that ultimately will empty out into your urethra, which is another name for the tube in your penis. The ureter that's coming out of the two kidneys. The two kidneys, after they've processed it, have two tubes that enter into the bladder. The bladder then has a tube that will go, in male's case, to their penis, to their urethra. And the ureter, the tube, goes through the prostate. Okay? So it's coming from the bladder, it runs through the prostate, then it goes to the urethra. And if that prostate gets tightened down, that's what causes the problems with prostate. That's why you have a prostate problem, if you do. And that's what I really think one of the reasons you don't see it generally with young men, and it's almost epidemic with older men, has to do with looking forward, having a certain amount of, oh, am I going to make it? And there goes the prostate. I don't have any prostate issues. I'm 65 and I have no prostate issues. Well, Mystery School 101 could be called what you put there, Sandy, but we all have to start somewhere. And to me, that if we put ourselves on a path, we've kind of a path of self-improvement, we've removed ourselves from the dummy list. So, Brandon, you said, Mod, can you give an example? Did I give an example? Did you ask for that and then I did give an example? I appreciate Mari. I mean, again, I want this to be kind of a conversation, and the fact that I get thrown off so much, that's really on me, not on people wanting to dialogue with me. So I'll get better at it. Matter of fact, I've had a couple of instances tonight where I managed. It's almost like, oh, hold on to the thought, then read, and you can go there. Sometimes what happens, I just read without remembering. It's almost like I didn't hit save on the thought. If I hit save, then I'm safe. Okay, thank you, Brandon. So that's the first chakra, and again, this is a cursory. This is not really the full, but how I'd really like to go into it, because it can actually get quite complex. But I want to move to the second chakra. I do have a notepad, and I use it in certain situations. Very often when we have chats after, like, shows, and we have after shows, and we all have to kind of like wait our turn. I sit there with a pad and write down the things. It was funny, I had the pad ready last night because the last two times Raksha ended his streams, just as he was closing down, something he said gave me a little mini download. Stomach chakra would be yellow, Brandon. So get a little download, but I didn't get a download last night. We won't say more about that. Finishing up my creatine water. I recently started taking some creatine and using my dumbbells a little bit, and I actually have managed to put on a little bit of weight from it. Although I doubt, no matter how successful I get, I'm not sure I'm going to go full stick, sex, and hammer and like put on a vest with no shirt on. So, the second chakra. I'm going to keep it Western. Now, if there's anybody here who knows of the subtleties between Western and Eastern systems, I do too. I'm talking to a Western audience, and I'm going to kind of keep it pretty Western and not make it confusing by the two systems. That's the other thing. A lot of times there are subtleties and further kind of almost breaking the original story up a little bit, nuancing it, but the nuancing, I really feel, should not happen too early. It's almost like once that original piece sits well, it's okay. Now that piece is sitting pretty. Let's show, like, let's show how there's a few branches that can kind of come out of that bulb. Leather is really, I mean, I have some leather gloves. Um, I'm a vegetarian for almost 30 years. Don't consider myself a vegan, but leather, I know where leather comes from. And so I don't, I consider leather somewhat precious because of its origin. Very useful. I will use it, but I consider leather a precious resource. So the second chakra, although it is most associated with, it is, commonly, and like almost, if anybody's heard anything about chakra and second chakra, they kind of go, oh, that's the sex chakra, isn't it? It's also known as the sacral chakra. And if you know the spine, the first chakra would be associated with the very bottom of the spine, which is known as the coccyx. Then you have that bone. If you've ever seen anybody from behind naked, before the crack of their butt starts, you'll see there's almost like a little triangular part of the spine. That's known as the sacrum. They're fused vertebrae there. The coccyx are fused vertebrae too, but they're the ones that come at the bottom of the V of the sacrum, and then there's a continuation of the spine that curves inward. That's the coccyx. That flat plate before the lumbar spine starts is called the sacrum. So the sacral chakra sits right kind of like if you were going to work on the second chakra from somebody from behind, which often happens, you do face down, you would put your stone. If you wanted to use a stone to work on a second chakra, you would place it on the sacrum. The second is orange. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 is Roy G. Biv. Red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. Okay, Roy G. Biv. Make believe it's a guy's name. First name Roy, middle initial G, last name Biv, B-I-V. So anyway, yeah, the second chakra is energized, nourished, educated by the frequencies that we observe as orange. Okay, remember, this is the orange frequencies are part of our optic perception of them. So it is very much tied in with sexuality. It's also the seat of where the emotions are. This is where I want to get a little extra. Well, I want to use my scientific knowledge because the information in the Vedas is science. Chakras are science. So what was I gonna? Oh yeah, the gut. Okay. In a healthy large intestine, which is quite rare in the Western world, antibiotics, which a lot of people use, and I would say women probably use antibiotics a little bit more because they're more prone to urinary infections than men are. And there are other ways besides antibiotics, but the average person will probably treat it with antibiotics. And if you have an infection, antibiotics is not a boneheaded way to go about things. But one of the problems with antibiotics is that they kill bacteria. They're anti-life, antibiotic. And it's not like our immune system, which becomes immunocompetent in our thymus gland. An antibiotic is just kill. And one of the things that antibiotics are notorious for killing is our gut bacteria, which are not one single group of bacteria. It's a whole plethora of bacteria. A matter of fact, a little unpleasant fact for some is, let's say you wanted to, if making yogurt is you take yogurt culture You put it in milk and you keep it in a pretty warm environment until it's finished. Okay, it's just you're transferring one culture into a medium, in this case milk, and then that culture influences that medium and uses the lactose that's in the milk for this bacterial culture to thrive. And then it grows into yogurt. If you did not have yogurt, at least in the Caucasus, remember when Dannon Yogurt would show those people from Georgia eating yogurt? Well, they still have they make their own yogurt. Now, if you have a yogurt batch, you make yogurt from yogurt. If you had no yogurt batch, all you had was some milk and you needed to get a new culture started, at least before the modern age and the contamination of our bodies, if you needed to start a yogurt culture, you would use baby poop. Why would you use baby poop? Because the baby poop has all of the bacteria from their gut there. The gut bacteria and the bacteria, because these are the good ones, okay, this is not the E. coli group. So the good ones, the good bacteria in our intestines are largely the same bacteria that you will find in yogurt. So anyway, basically the inside of our large intestine should look like a big lawn. You know how a lawn is just like kind of like just one big, like a pasture. Imagine a pasture, because a pasture has all kinds of grasses and low-lying herbs. It's it's just rich with life, even though it looks almost like it's just one big thing. And our intestines in a healthy environment the walls of our intestines should be fuzzy, like as if we have lawns growing there. When you take antibiotics, very high acidic food, long periods of stress can actually make those walls either full of holes where the lawn is patchy or to the part where it's completely stripped. I watched a video a few months ago, and it was about how unhealthy GMO foods were. They had a picture of a very, very obese man. And one of the things they were trying to demonstrate was how much mass there was compared to the skeleton. So it was an X-ray. The most amazing thing about this X-ray was, okay, so like there was kind of like, it was just like any X-ray, the soft tissue kind of has like a grayish, you can kind of see it there, but the bones stick out. So the whole purpose was to show this man's skeleton in relation to how much body this skeleton was hidden in. The most amazing thing of this X-ray was, although you couldn't really, you could see like, almost shadowy things of the other organs, the large intestine was this black squiggle. It was easier to see than the bones. And the reason why this man's large intestine, his small intestine wasn't visible, only his large intestine, in an X-ray. And that was because it was so impacted with the sludge that builds up. Once that lawn is down, because they're consuming everything and they're turning it into nutrients, and most importantly, one of the main nutrients that the gut bacteria produce is vitamin B12. Yeah, it was darker than the bones. It was like this black, what the shape of the intestine is, how it goes down, goes across, and it goes down, it goes up, it goes across, it goes down. And then you could actually, not only could you see the main part, you could see where it goes down into the rectum. I mean, you could see this, it was black until it went to the bottom of his body. That's how impacted, and people who have done colonics, when the stuff comes out, sometimes they say it's almost like pieces of rubber that kind of come off of there. It's a plaque. And this man had so much plaque on every inch. I mean, this black started right at the appendix. In case you don't know basic anatomy, the end of your small intestine is where your appendix is. That's where you have the ileocecal valve, where the contents of the ileum, or the small intestine, then go into the cecum, which is the beginning of the large intestine. Anyway, One of the purposes, in my opinion, and one of the things that has maybe led to poor decision making. So the second chakra is where our emotions lie. It's also where our large intestine has most of its energetic input. A healthy colon is loaded with millions of bacteria. Bacteria are alive, sentient within their capabilities, and remember, they're operating from a first chakra perspective. When people say trust your gut, that's if you have anything left in your gut to talk to you. What it is like in other words, they live in your body. Your body is their home. So part of their survival is tied into your survival. So when people sometimes get into situations that yes, Mari, instinct. When they get into situations that have very subtle information that is important, these bacteria that live in that subtle stream are aware that something is wrong, that there is danger, and danger for you is danger for them. So there is a whole data set of basic survival info. It's almost like an extra module to help you with the information from your first chakra. So with the consciousness of the second chakra, which is your feeling body, this is where your feeling body is. This is where your pain body would be. And the pain body is part of the feeling body in distress. It is the feeling body, or the emotional body. The feeling body and emotional body are the same thing. And that's the emotional body is tied in with the second chakra, but we will get into it because the second and third chakra kind of are dance partners. So I feel that with between a toxic diet and an acid forming diet, and then of course antibiotic use, a lot of people are really suffering from poor intestinal flora. You have so much of our intuition comes from them, and if they're not there, they can't speak. And if they're not speaking, you're losing a data stream. And that's important. But let's get back to feelings and emotions. So, one of the things, problems with English, and apparently, I was listening to something last night, and I think it was on, I think it was Danny McKinney on the Removing the Shackles. Let me try and recover my thought. I'll just get back into the feelings. It will come. So, with the processing, they had mentioned that basically English, which has some, German and Dutch roots too, and the Dutch were the first major commerce type people, that basically English was composed for two things: to support our legal system and our commerce system, which are inextricably entwined. And the fact that, and also with our legal system, those double meanings, like if you go to a court and the judge reads you a bunch of things and it says, "Do you understand?" They're not asking you if you comprehend what was just said. They just read a list of charges and they want to know if you will stand under them. Do you understand the charges? It means, will you stand under them? So English is this tricky language. So one of the words we really have limited, that has really limited us, is the singular word love in English. Now I think Spanish might have its own, also its limitations being a European language. But in Greek, there were three main ones. There's another odd one that I don't remember the term, because it's kind of like the love that a slave would feel for their master. They actually have a word for that kind of odd love. And boy, I could talk a lot about slavery, because that's an interesting subject. And I don't mean the 200 years of American slavery. I'm talking about world. Let me see if I can get back on track here. So English. So there were in the three important words for love in Greek are eros, philos, and agape. Eros is romantic love. Philos is brotherly love. Agape is that awe, love of all. And it's quite different than the other two. Eros is the love that arises from the consciousness of the second chakra. And which makes sense. I mean, when your first chakra represents an amoeba in many ways, a single-celled organism. Now we're getting more complex. So at the very least, we're going to have the impulse for mating. That's why the second chakra, it has everything to do with our sexuality. Because unlike the amoeba, who can split, and that's how they do it, they do mitosis, we do a birthing process, which gets a little more complex. And so now there are certain attraction, repulsion type of things that get set up. So the eros sets up little magnetism that is largely geared towards procreation. Infatuation at the erotic level can be experienced as love. People probably have gotten married on that love, with, and they probably have some philos, which is that kind of, social love, brotherly love, social love. And we see the fragility, and for me, basically that it isn't real love. Hello, Kalendal. Because when things go bad in these romantic things, the people who were formerly, the love story of the millennia, are now throwing shit at each other, knives at each other, bombs at each other, setting each other's houses on fire, sicking lawyers on each other. Real love doesn't break down like that. Real love knows how to forgive. So Eros, although an important aspect for attraction, for mating, is not real love. But it sure releases a lot of juicy chemicals. It is a blast of an experience. That erotic drive, that the projection onto the object of your amour. It's quite a ride. It's like one of the best drugs. And sometimes it actually will turn into a very fruitful, rewarding example of real love. I mean, people can start out just having hots for each other, and then grow and grow, and then they kind of find each other. They find that they're in awe of each other. Well, once they're in awe of each other, they have agape. Now they're in love. So besides the sexual, we have the other things, and this is where why we want to kind of take our consciousness and bring it into the second consciousness to see that it's really it gets really complex. From now, the real simple concerns of the first chakra, when we go into the second chakra, things rapidly get complex. So besides the simple impulses of procreation and the creation of an attraction that will be attached to a form of love called eros, then we have the emotions that can arise just from pursuing that drive. Male or female, that drive brings them to, somebody that they would like to get closer to, whatever. The attraction is from one side and not the other side. The other side declines the invitation of union or greater immersion, and then the person with the amour might experience rejection. They might experience being hurt. So now you see how we start to build up pains. But part of that is because we're only at the second chakra. We haven't brought in more. So I won't dwell too much here. I think we kind of got it late. Let's go. We've done red, we've done orange. Let's go yellow to the third chakra. The third chakra is associated with what is called the mental body. It's located in your solar plexus, right below your sternum. And if you notice, you ever somebody says something to you that really hurts, and I feel like I got punched in the gut. It is interesting to notice where you feel that punch. If you feel it kind of like in your belly button area, that's a second chakra punch. Most of the time, we're going to feel like we got punched in the solar plexus. Yes. Yes, Mari. And when you're feeling like you got kicked in the solar plexus, the way to enter into that repair will be through your mental body. The mental body is largely where monkey mind arises. And the mental chakra can be overstimulated. And when it's overstimulated, it'll chat even more, and can also, if it's overstimulated and not in balance with the lower chakras, it can get so logical. In other words, where it's only processing data streams that are received kind of in that frequency, and it tends to ignore feelings both of survival and of an emotional nature. I'm going to show something to Mari. This is, let me get on, see myself on camera so I can make sure I'm showing it. This is just a little cluster I have of citrine. Citrine is a yellow quartz, and you can often find them in little clusters. I also have a particularly nice formed head here. I've had this for, my God, almost 30 years. This particular crystal here. But this one I tend to use because it has a very developed point. It has a good focus. Anyway, there have been times when I'm feeling a little bit kicked in my solar plexus, and what I do is I take this and I turn it upside down so it's pointing into my body, and I put it right there and you can palpate. If you palpate it, you'll see that it's a little tense there. And when you have issues, you put this here, and sometimes it's good to send a little extra energy, but you don't have to. But you put it there and you will feel it's almost like a massage, like where the tissue or the puckering starts to unpucker. I would say that it works in places, not in full-blown crisis. There often you will need some kind of neurochemical at least cycle breaker sometimes. But let me get back to the live chat. So the third chakra. For me, the third chakra, it's really a processing center. And to process the data that is arising, because these are raw data. They need interpretation. They need integration. And that's really what the third chakra should be doing. That's really what the mental body is there to receive all of the data streams that are arising, and then bringing, taking them into consideration. Like there are certain, like you might have heard people say, "Oh, I knew logically didn't make sense, but I went with my feeling." Some people say I went with my heart. Trust me, heart is wisdom. Heart doesn't make dumb decisions, and that's why for me, it's really important to why I'm naming the different loves, because the love and the cleanliness of what it goes on in the heart, I think should not be confused with what happens below the heart, and it is the coordination of those first three and getting them in order and understanding the validity of what they do, but then making sure that they're doing what they're doing. And you as the owner of these portals, they're your portals to manage. And if you don't manage them, they're unguarded doors. And they are entry and exit. Now, in the positive meaning of entry, this is where you're receiving that nourishment for that particular stream. Again, it's coming from everywhere, but it breaks down. It discreetly. It's almost like you get bathed in a white light. It just lands as one thing. It doesn't land like, oh, here's the violet ray and, here's the yellow ray. No, it comes as one thing. And then each chakra has the ability to absorb a frequency spectrum from that overall white light. Hello, Robin. So the logic of the third chakra is very much tied in with decision making and even the sorting of feelings. Let's say here's a good case. You meet somebody and your feelings tell you you don't like them. Okay? Valid. Okay? You have felt it. Something about this person I don't like. All right? So you don't question that. It's not a question of, ooh, is that a valid signal? You give it full validity. The question you want to find out, that where the third chakra comes in, is why don't we like this person? And then you might say, oh, well, it reminds me of my mother. Is the reason, when you query, why don't you like this person? Oh, it reminds me of my mother. Oh, so the next question would be so do we really not like this person? Or do we have an issue with mother that this person's reminding us of? What's the issue with mother? Oh, well, she did this to me. Okay, or she said this to me. All right, can you remember the moment? Did she really mean it? Was she angry? Was it a sincere statement, or was it just something said in anger? Is it something that you've held on to? Does it benefit you to continue holding on to it? I mean, there's like a whole question and answer response that can go on between a loving, compassionate, caring third chakra, because don't forget, it's sitting below the heart. The heart can't speak to it. Going into that emotional and going, okay, let's try to settle things down in here. And you can't settle something down unless you will hear, unless you allow for everything that arises to be valid, But then once it arises, you do some Socratic method of finding out what's really going on here. We've already found out the reason you don't like the person because they remind you of your mother, because of something she said to you at blah, blah, blah. You understand how this can, and you can use your third chakra to get to the root and provide healing from that mental processing, but you have to allow everything that is coming up to be valid. It's all valid in its raw state, and the whole thing is you're just trying to parse things out so there's some logic, so that even the it's almost like acting. Sometimes you have conflicting emotions, so then your third chakra can almost act as like the third party counselor, doing like therapy for couple type thing. Okay, I'm going to take a little break here. I mean, I'm not going to go anywhere. I'm just going to, every once in a while, I got just kind of like, when the neurons are starting to catch fire. So how's everybody doing? Let me take a little stop at. I'm going to go back into third chakra most likely. Mediation, correct, Mari? So I'd like to thank everybody for being here. This is not an end. I'm not sure if I, greeted everybody. If I had done it 3 minutes ago, I would have been greeting 3 more people, but I didn't. Oh, thank you, Raksha. Hello, Lee. Now, one of the reasons, even for going through this, is for me, knowledge, especially in these times, we want knowledge of utility. This isn't time to put another book on our cerebral bookshelf of like, oh, got that new knowledge. We need to be reading the books that are applicable and getting the knowledge that are applicable to making us more coherent, more cohesive, less prone to fractionating and squabbling and getting caught up into the storms that arise from not integrating these first 3 chakras. I will have to touch on the heart a little bit, because much of the wisdom for the instruction of those 3 chakras can come from being in your heart. But your heart's a really peaceful place, dynamic, but coherent. So the reason why I'm going, for me, the kind of the esoterical 101 is to kind of help us get caught up on community hygiene or personal hygiene 101, and really leading into community hygiene, which is kind of hygiene 102. If we're a wreck, if we are discombobulated, if we are conflicted inside, we will run into conflicts outside. If we want to minimize the outer conflicts that we have in community, we will address that best by addressing our inner conflicts. It's where we come cleaner. So much of our conflicts are based on triggering. When you're clean, you do not trigger the same way. Now triggers are almost more like an alarm. You know, where the trigger, currently a lot of times when people trigger, what happens is the full blown, like they go into like a quick blast of that emotion with the neurochemical release, and that clouds things. Now all of a sudden it's like you took a hit of something, whatever it was, to get triggered emotionally, like into full, not rather than like, ooh, yeah, that just hit me in a bad way. That's different than being triggered. That's knowing that somebody stepped on it and now kind of like a flag goes up. For many people, forget about the flag. I mean, it's just kind of go like there's a trigger, and the next thing you know, the release of the neurochemicals happen, and then we have somebody who is different. In 1 second time, somebody changed. They changed neurochemically, and that just has different effects. So if we're gonna have a not conflict free, but conflict low community, it'll be made up of people, of a community of people experiencing minimal inner conflict. And I really feel one of the best ways to address inner conflict is understanding our own subtle anatomy, because the chakras are consciousness. Our conflicts have their root in consciousness stepping on its own toes. And that stepping on own toes is a lack of coordination. Knowing the chakras, what they do and how they work together, is to coordinate them. That's the whole point of tonight's little keeping it subtle talk. So let me take a little look at the live stream here. Oh, well, Sandy, with that being said, the synchronicity bell has to be rung. I'm reading the live chat for a second, so that's why I'll be quiet. Because I really like, this bell is nice, and it's very easy for me to get, because it's free, so I can do it, and it's got like a little Krishna playing a flute. I do have another bell that I keep behind me over here. Sounds like this. And then the big bell. This is a real gift. This is from Tibet. This bell is from Tibet. And it was a gift to me. And so this is somebody who actually knew the Dalai Lama. Let me see if I make sure I got it on the camera here properly. Here it is. I don't think that would be a suitable synchronicity bell. Yeah, I do love that. I mean, that's a great bell. But I think, for synchronicity, it's that's synchronicity is like a sweet little thing. That's like, dinner time, prayer time, tantra time, if you're feeling randy. Hello, Groovy. So how is everybody out there? So it's a Nying Ma bell, you're saying, Doc? One of the things that's really been beautiful is the campfiring that is occurring. I kind of coined the term for sacred gathering, bringing the pieces, the whole idea of people being heard, bringing their woo to sacred space. And then as people throw their woo out, they find it actually starts to assemble into something of utility. But it couldn't be done alone. Now, this is something I when I started spending some real quality time with Raksha and others, and in kind of councils, which are, again, just kind of a campfire. Hello, Pam. Hello, fellow Gnostic Pam. And where was I going? Oh yeah, and so sitting in I'm using kind of my own inner imagery of a time when things were simpler and part of a night's activities, whether it was weekend, weeknight, maybe a special night, but the whole tribe gathered around the fire. And, assemble at the fire would be, everybody from, young people to hopefully that group would have some wise elders in their group. And in there, what people could share. Like, I had this weird experience today. Oh, please tell us. Oh, I had this really bizarre dream a couple nights ago. Oh, please tell us. And then very often, as somebody's saying, oh, like let's say something strange today. Well, this happened to me, and somebody goes, oh, I had completely forgotten, but something like that happened to me too. Somebody sharing a dream and go, oh, I hadn't, wow, I'm just recalling it now. Yeah, I had a dream, but my dream had this. And then you start adding these pieces, and this whole picture starts to emerge. And I've now hearing the same thing, like Emily Moyer and Randy Maugan's doing their off-planet radio thing. We're saying that Emily Moyer has joined Danny McKinney in her Removing the Shackles. But they're all saying the same thing, that when they're getting to that, we need to regularly, they're all starting to say, you know something? We all have a piece of what we need to know. And we're not going to get the picture until we bring all our pieces. And part of it is also some of the pieces we bring, we need to kind of maybe chip some things off. But it gets refined in the campfire process. And but I'm hearing it everywhere, where everybody's now realizing, wait, we have to sit in some kind of campfire council or sacred space, and just without fear of somebody going, oh, that's crazy. No matter how crazy it is, please share it, because there's a chance once it's shared and everybody brings their piece, we don't have crazy anymore. We have coherent. And I'm very excited about not only feeling it, I'm participating in it, and then I'm seeing other people doing it, and it's the same conversation of people who are gathering in groups to share their what's going on inside them in a safe place where other people, and then other people can add. They're all getting the same results. They're all blown away. They're all realizing this is what we need to do. So that's a very exciting thing, and that's also why, for me, this little esoteric understanding of where like our real life experiences are profoundly impacted by our consciousness, and our consciousness isn't just, it ultimately becomes one thing. It's just like if you look at a cell, it's one cell. But let's look in a cell. We have an endoplasmic reticulum, we have the mitochondria, on and on. It's made of many things. So that's kind of, it's made of components, but it ultimately resolves in one coherent organism. And during that breather, I just want to remind everybody that at 10 o'clock tonight, there will be, Groovy Bean will be doing a stream, Yvonne. And but that's in 45 minutes. Actually, 44. Thank you, Pam, for saying that. We've been pretty successful in this little community that we, of people who know each other. That's what makes it a community, because we know each other's names. And glad to welcome you at least into the Can't You Hear Me Gnostic part of it. And it's really interesting. Pam, like from a Gnostic perspective, and paying attention to what's going on in, with the Gnostic community, and how that has its different. Obviously, John Lash is huge in some. He's actually the center of gravity in some Gnostic communities, and then then you have the the Nag-Hanostic community. Which is, I feel, is really probably a lot larger. Not as coordinated, because they're coordinating around a body of work that isn't particularly coherent, which is the Nag Hammadi texts. But at least the conversation is all good. You hear you're hearing a familiar cosmology. You're in familiar territory. It's quite beautiful. But I'm noticing. As John is going into a different phase of his teaching, which currently involves his Kalika War Party, a lot of people are getting quite alarmed by it, and I see the same inner turmoil and inner conflict in people, creating more drama than is really necessary. Getting myself a little bit placed here, but it was a concern for me, Pam, because each from a perspective of the Gnostics historically and how they were just basically exterminated. So I'm seeing a bit of what I would call a Gnostic Renaissance revival. Now, part of that revival really got kicked off by the Nag Hammadi texts, because then a group that had basically been lost to history was resurrected through the Nag Hammadi texts. I think John Lash did an incredible job taking it, placing it into its historic roots, and understanding it being a shamanic, animistic based way of being on the planet. For me, I was familiar with the Nag Hammadi. I'd read portions of it, and it couldn't grab me. It wasn't until the Sophianic narrative myth was put out at least in its current form, that it was like, oh, this really worked. When you plugged into it, man, did things open up. Okay, I see a question, so I want to. It says dose. I'm assuming you meant, does anxiety come from the third chakra? Generally, I would say it doesn't so much come from it, but it gets experienced in there, because what often happens is there's a bunch of feelings, there's a bunch of data that's coming out from, at least from the second chakra, and probably from the first chakra. And of course, the second chakra, if you have gut bacteria, their stream is part of that. The third chakra, if it doesn't listen, if it doesn't get involved in that turmoil, it kind of backs up right there. It's kind of like a delivery has been taken, but it's not being processed. It's not being transmuted. It's building. And that's why often anxiety feels like a knot in your solar plexus area. You're not using, or else maybe it could be, I'm trying to use it, I just can't figure it out. Trust me, I get in that. And that's when I will call different people. And this, like, there was a period of great anxiety a month or so ago. Fortunately, I had somebody like Roxy to turn to, and I'm going, okay, I got this feeling of anxiety, like the sword of Damocles, like something bad wants to happen. What I can't parse it out is whether it's personal or general. So because I decide now, Raksha has, because of being a shaman, has people talking to him constantly about what's going on with them. So because of that, I'm able to turn to him, and he's able to say, everybody's basically reporting the same thing. So if everybody's kind of got this general anxiety, hello, doc, if everybody's experiencing almost like in its descriptive terms what seems to be the same symptom, well, then that allows me to go, okay, there's a really good chance that this feeling of like something is about to hit isn't a personal anxiety. It's a general anxiety. That was, do you know how much sanity that saved? So that's why you want to be in community. And no matter how, I mean, I consider myself a relatively wise man, but one of the reasons, to me, part of that wisdom is knowing that when I get stuck, it's no time to go, well, I'll do this myself. Hell no, man. This is time to turn to allies and be vulnerable. I'm stuck. I'm fucked up. I don't know what's going on here. I don't know it all. So let's share this. And that's how we get some resolve. So yes, anxiety generally is experienced as a third chakra overload, backup, not processing any number of things. And it's been it came in some insane waves. It abated. It hasn't been so bad so far in 2018. And the other thing, what's also nice about working with different people is Raksha comes from a Native American tradition. I mean, I'm Native American too, but after multiple inroads to try and get closer to Native Americans, it's like, no, white man, go do your own thing. And I understand that. But the Native Americans generally have an incredible reverence for Gaia. And the plenty of evidence is when the Europeans arrived, there wasn't any running water you couldn't drink from. They understood the sacredness of the earth. If one were to look into their multiple mythos, we might not find a whole lot that is exactly like the Gnostic or the Sophianic narrative. Doesn't matter to me. If you love the earth, if you love Gaia, if you understand that you are a part of the earth, part of that environment, that you have a sacred contract with that environment, that puts you in the same camp, and you will get the ability to work with people who hold their planet kind of in the same reverence. They might not, their mythos, like in other words, their cosmos, their backstory, where they arose, maybe even how the earth arose, those things can differ. But when you have love of our planet, our mother, understanding there's an intelligence here, you have enough commonality where your background myth largely becomes something that could get in the way. And also, the Native Americans are not people in need of a myth. They have a myth. They have a cosmos that they derive an origin from. The biggest problem is in the Western society, where the cognitive dissonance of the belief systems that most of us inherit in our Western traditions, the monotheisms, don't do that. They give us a cosmology, but it's the one that has original sin and all kinds of these crazy rules and a hell and a jealous and seemingly psychopathic being that calls itself God or whatever. A lot of people, millions of people, have left that system and that it is great. You need to break. I mean, you should break from your tormentor and abuser. But they didn't. They have nothing. They have a vacuum where they cast something off. They did not replace it, and so now their ships adrift in the sea with no direction. There aren't even any cardinal compass points for them to orient themselves to. So for me, in the Western situation, this is where the Sophianic narrative sits huge. Because to me, it's a legitimate, it's the origin story that I can live in, can explore, can verify for myself. It is true from my own experiential gnosis. So I have my directions. I have my cardinal directions. I have my north, south, east, west, up, down, center. A case of origin, of placement, why I'm here, what futures can arise from that. The Native Americans, although they don't have the Sophianic narrative, they have a mythos. They still have an origin story that doesn't turn them into, into things to possibly be, roasted for eternity at the end of their run. And that's so for me. It's actually Westerners. It's the English-speaking world and Westerners, Spanish, French-speaking, Portuguese-speaking, and so on. The ones who actually probably were most affected by either the Catholic Church or the Protestant Reformation aspect of it. In the Western world, obviously we go into the Middle East, the majority of the population that belong to a system will be Muslim. But as you know, there's Mandean Christians, there's all kinds of the old church or Orthodox churches all over Syria. Syria is really where the Christian church kind of began. So it's really the Westerners, when they leave the dominant mythos of the Western world, which is Adam and Eve, basically Genesis. Genesis is the foundation myth of the Western world. And the alternative for me for that foundational myth is the Sophianic narrative myth, which was the predominant myth of that time before the other myths started competing with it. Doc, one of the things that to me typifies Gnostic writing from Nag-Gnostic writing is the almost obsession with the figure of Jesus or the Christ. Obviously, an idea and of a teacher showing up was one of the hot ideas in the Levant at that time. And that's why it seems there was at least 3 different separate people with different messages that kind of got assembled into one person. And I'm quite sure that assemblage happened in Rome after the Council of Nicaea, or was certainly in process, which may have been what formed the final shape and message of what came out of what became Catholicism after the Council of Nicaea. When Roman Catholicism became the religion of the empire. So in many cases, there were pagan teachers who were kind of, well, you got your congregation. If you'll switch, you can keep your congregation. We just, keep the temple, whatever. We just, your franchise is under new management. Yaldabaoth is the name that the Gnostics had for the being that is the Judeo-Christian God, yes. The Gnostics, having been shamans for thousands and thousands of years, were well aware. I mean, they already had the Sophianic narrative, which included the creation of Yaldabaoth. I shouldn't say we, they understood the nature of the universe, of our galaxy, and most specifically our placement on the planet. Because it doesn't matter that there are probably thousands, if not millions, of other anthropine type beings on other planets. They're unfolding in their own thing. And when I mean the planets, I mean the planets of the galaxy. The ancient Gnostics, the ones that, the Telestai of the mystery schools, were very focused on our galaxy and then our specific strain of anthropos that arose on the earth, because this is where we are. This is our focus. The anthropines on other planets have their focus. Now and then of course we hopefully will all at one point come together. Matter of fact, ultimately that probably will be what happens. So they not only knew of Yaldabaoth, they also kind of had, like, you need to leave that alone. I mean, just like with any magic, if you know that there are certain beings that are, equivalent to like going up to a great white shark and sticking your finger in its mouth, you don't do that. But obviously this being was known to others, and it was able to get certain people to let's create dialogue, open portals, and whatever. And sure enough, we have what we have. So yes, Yaldabaoth is also Jehovah, Yahweh, the Judeo-Christian being, their God, who is a byproduct. Now, the other thing is that the Telestai, the Gnostics. Telestai is those who are aimed. I want to use that more often, because Gnostic is not what the Gnostics called themselves. What they did have a state of gnosis, where you experience your place in the cosmos, and you know that's gnosis. And from that place of absolute know, at least for yourself and yourself, they were able to engage with other people in dialogues. You could call them philosophical arguments, so to speak. And they could hold their own, and they had this reputation for being so grounded, because they weren't what if. No, this is this, this is this, this is this, this is this. And so they kind of got known as the know-it-alls. So Gnostic is kind of like a pejorative know-it-all term. Telestai is what those people call themselves, or those who are aimed. So the Telestai they knew that Yaldabaoth, or Yaldi as I call him for short, they knew Yaldi was conceived in a kind of a cosmic accident. He's a wreck. He's bad news, but he's not evil. He's Yaldi. He had a bad turn of cosmic events. Apparently, there was quite a bit of compassion. It's just like, maybe after some ages pass, and if we really get it together, maybe maybe he can be improved. But in his current state, it's you leave it alone. You leave it alone. And for certain people, that meant, oh, leave it alone. That means I have to engage it, don't I? And that's what happened. So I like the fact that there is no real hate. Hate's a hard, hate is toxic. I mean, it has its places, but man, it's kind of like, you don't want to be in that place very long. And then I even also really believe that hate should be only ever felt for things and never for people. I mean, there are some people who were seriously, probably in need of removal, but that's done from a place of hygiene and not a place of rage, retribution, hate, or anything. Um, you know, so there was no real, and there wasn't like Yaldi and his archon angels, and then of course the multitudes that are kind of byproducts from the main heptomad or seven, which correspond to the archangels. The heptomad basically is the archangels. I can't remember all. The four basic ones are Uriel, Raphael, Gabriel, Michael, and then there's three others. And those are the archon angels, the heptomad. And the whole thing, it was just kind of like, you don't. If there's a lion in the jungle and it never comes out of the jungle, and if you go in the jungle, do you have to worry about it? You don't hate it. It's just it's a situation that needs to be dealt with, and it was being dealt with great compassion and wisdom by the Telestai. But then other people came along and decided to dabble, and I think in some of it was because through their own let's call it Gnostic, shamanic type of things, they identified it, and they not only did identify, they identified with it, and then the fuckery begins. But there is, yeah, and Yaldi and the archons aren't evil. They are what they are. They are envious. They're jealous. Because we're special and they're an accident. I understand. And the Telestai understood it. They could understand how and why they would resent us. We get it. Just watching the time here. And so there was a real dispassionate way to deal with them. The only time that now because there is all that jealousy and envy and spite, and because of the way our brain is like a receiving station that many things goes, they are able to put riders in the general cosmic stream, and if there is an ear for them, they'll get picked up, and they get inserted in a way where all information comes in, so it can just seem like it's part of our normal stream. Once you recognize the signature and the energy of it, you can be sitting there and like suddenly drift off on like a crappy thought, and all of a sudden you go, "Oh, you got me. Okay, clean up." It just really becomes like an observing. It's almost like the mosquito land. When the mosquito identifies you, then you can hear that buzzing, and then you know it's time to give a smack. So there wasn't there. It is these things that result. Like, in other words, if these if these spiteful, envious, jealous people manage to talk somebody into a rage where they actually end up killing somebody, and a human committed an evil act. See, this is the whole thing: is that their influence is certainly toxic and anything but benign. Their influence is absolutely horrific, but it's not evil. It's based in spite and jealousy. The only time evil results from these energies are when humans do evil things. There is no evil except for the evil that humans do. There is no existential evil. There is an existential jealousy, spite, envy, longing for what we have, but it is not evil. It is what it is. It's a cosmic mistake. It's really, I like for some reason, probably because a lot of people do discuss Genesis, even in, from an esoteric perspective, and at least the phraseology, and that's when it hit me about the serpent in the garden, and of course, could be many things. What happened when it says something, about and that, and this is the at least the term, I think it was a King James version, and that old serpent, spoke to Eve, but it was that phraseology, that old serpent. And what I got from that was that basically the old knowledge. Genesis represents the new Yaldi wave of cosmology. And sitting behind the arrival of that are tens of thousands of years of shamanic exploration, tens of thousands of years of worshiping an earth goddess. So we have these people, at least in the garden, who are not connected to the ancient myths. So when you see that old serpent, to me, since serpent represents knowledge, what they were being exposed to was the gnosis, or the wisdom of the mystery religions. That old serpent, and that's what the old serpent reference is to me. Is that someone representing that old knowledge, the wisdom of the past, spoke to them. That old serpent. That's what I get from that. It's actually cutting the head. Yeah, Medusa. I have a new appreciation for Medusa, and especially since by the time somebody like Medusa shows up, the Greeks are already in full, patriarchal dominance, and so demeaning women is, part of what they do. Medusa is a kind of like, female deity type thing, and what is on her hair? Serpents. So for me, the serpents of her hair are actually representing a personage that probably represents great wisdom, the wisdom of the ages, and to the people bringing a new patriarchy into the world, starting with the Greeks, at least from their mythos. This whole idea of creating two things that the patriarchy doesn't like: women and the knowledge that existed before it. Medusa, to me, is a kind of a representation of both women, and by the snakes in her hair, the ancient knowledge that would have arisen from a wise woman of that time. And then, of course, any other stories attached to it, to me, is just, boogeyman stories. Now, Hydra is another story. I want to give Doc Illusion some props. Doc Illusion has a YouTube YouTube channel, and it's called Doc Illusion. Doc Illusion is a Gnostic. His conversations are based in Gnostic thought, Gnostic concerns, Sophia. He's walking his path, and he's sharing that path as he's walking it on YouTube. So I just would like to give a shout out to Doc Illusion and his YouTube channel. Now, Pam, I don't know, are you still here, Pam Kennedy? The other one who introduced himself as a Gnostic? Might be able to look in my participants thing and find that out. Oh, maybe not. Okay. I was just wondering if they had any kind of presence on YouTube. Okay. I'm going to take a look and see if I missed anything in the live chat. Yeah, you know something? Doc, the Ophiuchus serpent, I love it. And the interesting that's the other interesting thing, and one of the reasons why John Lash does the sky watching as opposed to astrology. And John is an astrologer, but in sky watching, like even now, he made in his last video he made some comment about what's happening in the sky, and he makes a real difference about where, like, a planet could be right, like in the body of Scorpio, but it's not in the zodiac of Scorpio. A planet could be somewhere on the scales, the constellation of the scales, which corresponds to Libra, without being in the sign of Libra. The zodiac is this 12-part grid that is very archontic. And this is, to me, one of the great things. I don't know if you're still here, Niche, where astrology could possibly be turned into the double-edged sword that it can be. We probably should remember that originally astrology was reserved for kind of royalty and the priesthood, the people who were tied in with archontic fuckery. So the astrologers would be able to use the influence of the planets that the archons created. In case you don't know, the archons and Yalda both created the solar system to capture the Earth and the Sun and try and engage in some fuckery. And in creating their planets, which allowed for a horoscopical round prison to be built around us. Energetic. Again, it's not a prison we can bust out with anything. It's meant to hold the unarisen, the asleep, the sheep. That's all. That's really all it can contain. Once you wake up, it's not a prison at all. It's a bunch of floss strung about, making to look like iron bars. So the kings and queens had their astrologers because when they were going to do important things, they wanted to know what was there fuckery, or was it one of those, was it a good cop moment? Because astrology is based on good cop, bad cop. Oh, this is positively aspected. Oh, this is a bad aspect, whatever. It's, the astrology is based on allowing people to understand the fuckery of the planets. And with sky, and if you notice, it's reduced to 12. There is a 13th constellation, Ophiuchus, and I really like it. The man wrestling, or maybe even just holding the serpent. Maybe they're hanging out, and those 13 signs correspond with the 13 moons. The Hebrews in Islam still observe a lunar calendar, and so does the Catholic Church, which is why Easter isn't on the same day every year, because the calendar is sun tracking, but the sacred calendars are still moon tracking, because the whole idea is they're going to do their best to ride certain subtle energies, while the rest of us have to deal with a compromised system. So now that astrology has broken out, I just feel that modern astrologers, if they can wrap their heads around that the planets are beings, the planets were put there to hold the energies of beings that go around the sun, which is also going around the earth, and to exert as much influence over the divine experiment on earth as they could. And as long as those machinations are unseen, it's a lot easier to get away with. I mean, think about it. When people can take astrology and look back in history and go, oh, look at where the planets were when this war happened. Like there were certain aspects in astrology that clearly point to war. The reason they point to war is because that will be the influence that they're going to try. That's the influence on the psychology of the human species. But that's a psychology that is unaware that it's being steered. Once that consciousness is then understands, wait a second, these are influences, not compulsions. I think there was an astrologer said the stars influence, they do not compel. So once you're aware of an influence, it doesn't have such an influence. If you're not aware of an influence, then it actually will probably do what it wants to do, because you think you're making your decisions without understanding that your decision making has been influenced, because you're not aware that there was an influence. You're not looking for that influence. So there are multiple ways of taking our power back, because the ones who quote unquote took it, they did it through tricks and mirrors, smoke and mirrors, and of course misanthropic anthropines that would actually pick up weapons and kill people for ideas and kings. So we're now at 9:52, and I never wait till exactly 10 o'clock. So I have about 5 minutes left here. And so if you have any questions, statements, want to say goodnight to each other, whatever, because in about 5 minutes I will end the stream. How'd the talk go tonight? Was it, did it have a coherence? Well, Doc, that's what, the concept, and like I said, going forward about having what I call campfires, where we get around and because we're not typing, because we're in an open forum, passing the talking stick. And then you, like you said, absolutely, these fucks worship time. I have my own theories, but it's deep. And nobody would expect you to do that in a chat, but at a campfire. That's the time for you to throw out your theories, and other people listen to them. And in their listening, they could be learning, they could be being triggered, they could say, no, not there. Hey, how about this, Doc? Or wait, I had this. And then you find out, oh, this piece plus this piece produces this view. And that view came from these two views, but alone they didn't quite produce the same thing. So it's, it's the idea that gathering around a campfire concept, campfiring, to hold sacred space where the whole purpose is for everybody who has something to say to have their moment to speak and to be heard, knowing that it's going to be considered, not judged. Yes, Mari, I actually didn't want, I said I might get to the heart, but no. The first three are quite a bit to digest. The first three are real, because once you go, to me, you need to really clear the first three to gain more of a full-time access to your heart. It's almost like, it's like there's a path, there's a doorway to your heart, and there's like this bramble forest that you need to kind of manage first. And those are the first three chakras. Yeah, Doc, I get the impression that you might have some equipment issues that you're working on, so that you can not have technical issues while you're trying to, just do something meaningful. Do I understand it correctly? Okay, so this is winding down. I'm going to thank you for your feedback, Pam. And so I do this every Monday night at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. There'll be a Can't You Hear Me Gnostic live stream, and it will continue to go like that for the future, as far as I can see it. Yeah, I like sitting on the ground too. Actually, I'm very particular about when I go into places. I look for wooden chairs. I don't like to sit on metal chairs. All right, everybody. So I'm going to say goodnight and stay sane, stay in a loving space as best as you can, and I'll see you next time.